This is the same argument as to why why the American election's still done on paper, right?
Yeah, you should do it on paper. And incidentally, I think the growth of postal voting is completely unacceptable. I'm with the Donald there, because when I was a kid in the UK, you had postal voting, but it was basically confined to people serving overseas in the military. It wasn't because I was on holiday, right? Or people who are bedridden. In other words, you'd ask for a postal vote in the most exceptional circumstances. I can remember driving very old people to the polling station on polling day. Actually, this is with my parents driving, when I was kind of 10 or something. They'd drive people who needed a lift to the polling station, right? Now, this business of there are all sorts of things. You can register other people. Once you've done that, if you've helped someone register to vote, if you're a member of a political party, you then enjoy something called reciprocation bias, which is, given that these people filled in the paperwork for me, I'd feel like a bit of a twat not voting for them. There's the possibility of coercion within households where the dad or someone else basically gathers up all the votes and votes collectively, okay? There's the possibility simply of non-privacy, that you could, in a coercive relationship, demand to see how the other person has voted. And there's also the possibility of fraud at scale, which, let's face it, the Americans don't have a perfect record of that, and that JFK didn't deserve to be elected in 1959, I don't think. I mean, there was a whole load of ballot stuffing in Chicago and places. And I think that it's not merely essential for the process to be honest. It needs to be seen to be honest, because the real point of democracy is not that you get a consensus on what government you want. It's that people arrive at consensus around a sincere belief about what everybody else wants, right? It's not a simple matter of aggregating preferences. It's getting the effective consensus of everybody that this is the collective decision writ large. And the second you start having weird electronic things, and the second you start to have postal voting, I think that disappears. And I think it's highly dangerous.
And we're seeing that now, right? We're seeing the fallout of that now.
Yeah, so actually, oddly, although I think the result's genuine, I think Biden won. I'm not necessarily disputing that. I think for the longer term, this practice of widespread postal voting is getting a bit concerning.
I'd agree.
Also, you could argue that this is a decision, okay, which merits a walk. Right? Maybe it's 5 minutes. I'm not saying it's 3 hours standing in a queue and all that kind of shit goes on where there's, effectively voter suppression, and that's got to be clamped on as well. But this is a decision where I think it just merits a walk, right? To make it a bit serious. Okay? This isn't like voting for fucking X Factor or Cake World or Dance Get or whatever these flaming programs are. It's a bit more serious than that, and I think you should just get off your ass, put some clothes on, and go for a fucking walk.
You want some ritual, some symbolism behind it. Pilgrimage, make a pilgrimage to the voting booth. Just
to say this is slightly unusual. This isn't just, and it's a really, really important point. I think that that business of voting at home is not really the same, because have you actually thought about it? I mean, the point about the walk, this is the one slight downside over Zoom versus business travel, although I'm a huge Zoom advocate, is that when you travel to a meeting, you did have an hour to think about the meeting while you were in transit. And sometimes now you find yourself teleported into a meeting from a different continent with like 1 minute to prepare. And so, that's another point I'd make, which is I just think the walk is good.
I get it.
It says, okay, I'm going here. I'm making a tolerable degree of effort. I'm not just going to basically tick a box and get it over with. And I think it deserves that level of solemnity. That's what I'd say.